Chapter 19. Tyler woke up and stared at his phone. He froze. The date said Sunday. That couldn't be right. The last time he checked, it was Friday. He was sure of it. But the screen didn't lie. Somehow a days had vanished, and he had no memory of them. A sick feeling settled in his stomach. He sat up abruptly and looked down. He wasn't even wearing the same clothes he fell asleep in. Shit, he muttered under his breath. Another blackout. His thoughts immediately jumped to Wednesday. She was coming back today. What would she say if she found out? What would she think? His memories were fractured, but the last thing he could clearly recall was their time in 1620s Jericho. The outcasts, especially the werewolves, had been wary around him. After one of his blackouts, they had pulled him aside, hesitant and unsure. When he asked what happened the night before, their answers were fragmented. "You went out hunting with us," one said, avoiding his eyes. "But then something changed," another added. "We had to carry you back." He remembered the way they whispered about it when they thought he couldn't hear. Long debates behind closed doors. Should they tell him what he did? What he became? Goody and Wednesday had put their foot down. They insisted he try to remember it on his own. And now, time was running out. Wednesday would be here. He thought back to a few days ago when Wednesday asked him if he had any blackouts. On his way to work, Tyler slowed down as he passed the woods. His dad's sheriff truck was parked on the shoulder, the flashing lights dimmed, but still casting an eerie glow through the trees. Yellow keep-out tape lined the forest's edge, snapping in the breeze. Whatever had happened, it wasn't small. Tyler kept walking. By the time he reached the weather vane, he was already behind on prep. He unlocked the back door, tossed his backpack in the corner, and fired up the espresso machine. The morning rush hadn't started yet, but the silence gave him too much space to think. He kept glancing out the front window, waiting. Sure enough, about 15 minutes into his shift, the bell above the door jingled, and in walked Sheriff Galpin, his uniform dusty and his face worn. "Morning," Tyler said, trying to keep his voice steady. His dad nodded, barely meeting his eyes. "You open?" "Always am." Sheriff Galpin sat at the counter while Tyler poured him a black coffee, no cream, no sugar. The usual. "What happened out there?" Tyler asked casually as he wiped down the counter, though his heart was anything but calm. His dad sighed. "Found a body in the woods." Tyler stopped wiping. "A man," Sheriff Galpin continued. "Dead. Limbs were severed." There was a long silence. Tyler swallowed hard. "When did it happen?" "We're not sure yet. Could have been last night. Maybe earlier. We're waiting on the coroner." He took a slow sip of coffee. "Listen, I don't want you anywhere near those woods, understood?" Before Tyler could press for more, the door opened again. The mayor's assistant stepped in, motioning urgently. Sheriff Galpin stood, leaving the coffee half-finished. "We'll talk later." He was out the door before Tyler could say another word. Tyler stared after him, hands gripping the edge of the counter. Blackout. Dead man. Limbs gone. He didn't remember Saturday. And now he wasn't sure he wanted to. Tyler couldn't wait any longer. The unease from the woods still clung to him, but the thought of seeing Wednesday again, finally, gave him something to hold on to. He grabbed his jacket, left the weather vane on break, and made his way to Nevermore. When the charter bus pulled up in front of the school, Tyler stood off to the side, watching as students stepped off one by one. The fencing team was the first to descend, still in their matching jackets, medals around their necks. But none of them looked victorious. Their faces were pale. Some wouldn't meet each other's eyes. Even the coach looked rattled, scratching his head as if replaying something over and over in his mind. Tyler frowned. Then he saw her, Wednesday, dressed in black as always, lugging her bag behind her. She looked more disgruntled than usual, her dark eyes sunken with exhaustion. Tyler stepped forward. "Hey, your call just cut off." "What happened?" Wednesday stopped in front of him. Her face was unreadable but unmistakably irritated. Rowan pushed me with his telekinesis off the slope while I was snowboarding, she said flatly. Ended up in the hospital. Tyler's eyes widened. Wait, what? Are you okay? I got off easy, she said with a dismissive shrug. A few bruises. Xavier wasn't so lucky though. Tyler's heart skipped. What do you mean? Rowan pushed him down the slope with his telekinesis too. He's still in the hospital. Tyler stared at her, stunned. He had a dozen questions, all jostling for priority in his mind, but before he could ask even one of them, Wednesday shook her head. I'm tired, she muttered. And I need to rest. And with that, she walked past him toward the school, leaving Tyler alone with a sick feeling in his stomach. Tyler wanted to press Wednesday for more, to cut through her exhaustion and get to the truth, but she was already walking away, disappearing into the dark stone walls of Nevermore. His chest tightened, irritation curling beneath his ribs. But he took a slow breath. Let it go. She's back. She's safe. That's what matters. She probably just needed rest. After all, being pushed off a mountain wasn't exactly a light weekend activity. Still, standing alone on the path with the wind brushing through the trees, Tyler's thoughts wandered right back to the woods. The yellow tape, the sheriff truck, the severed limbs, his blackout. All of it coiled together like a question he couldn't answer. Wednesday would want to know. The idea sparked something in him. She might be too tired to talk now, but give it a day, and this kind of story, she'd want every detail. So Tyler changed course and headed to the sheriff's station. The front lobby was quiet, lit by the buzz of flickering fluorescent lights. He slipped down the hall, instinct guiding his steps, until he paused just outside his father's office. Raised voices filtered through the closed door. Donovan, the mayor said sharply, just withhold publishing this news to the press. Tyler stilled, pressing himself against the wall beside the door, careful not to breathe too loud. This accident, or whatever you want to call it, cannot overshadow the exhibition. This is good business for Jericho. The best we've had in decades. Tyler narrowed his eyes. He already knew about the Wednesday Addams exhibition. The whole town did. The Nevermore archive discovery had been a big deal, and the press was expected to show up in droves. But now a man was dead in the woods. And the mayor didn't want that getting in the way. Inside, Mayor Walker continued, his tone laced with urgency. Jericho's finally getting the recognition it deserves. Scholars, historians, outcasts, they'll all be here. We've got Wednesday Addams' original writings. This town is about to be on the map again. We cannot let one incident derail everything. There was a pause. Then came Sheriff Galpin's voice, lower, gravelly, worn out. A man is dead, Walker. Torn apart. I'm not burying that for your damn festival. I'm not asking you to bury it, Walker snapped. Just delay it. Handle your investigation, fine. But keep it quiet until the exhibition is over. You leak this now, you know what happens. They'll cancel everything. Tyler's jaw clenched. His mind was spinning. A dead man in the woods. The mayor pressuring his dad to keep it quiet. Chapter 20. Within the stone halls of Nevermore, gossip traveled faster than sound. Students huddled in corners between classes, their voices lowered, but no less sharp with speculation. Can you believe Rowan got expelled? Someone whispered near the stained glass stairwell. To think he used his telekinesis like that on his own teammates. Nearly killed Wednesday and Xavier, another voice added. Pushed them straight off the slope. During spring break, Ajax slumped against the wall beside Enid, arms crossed. I was looking forward to bragging about our 5-star ski trip, he muttered. Now all anyone can talk about is Rowan going full supervillain. The whispers continued, but Wednesday tuned them out. She didn't have time for idle gossip, not when Rowan's cryptic warning still echoed in her mind. You're the one who's going to destroy the school. The memory of their confrontation in the police station played in her head again, each word more maddening the more she thought about it. Rowan had looked utterly unhinged, wild-eyed, rambling about prophecies, destiny, and some mysterious book. No wonder everyone dismissed him. But Wednesday didn't. Not entirely. She had challenged him, cool and calm despite the cuffs binding him to the interrogation chair. Prophecies are notoriously open to interpretation, she'd said, which makes them unreliable. But let's make a wager. I'll find it, this prophecy you're so obsessed with, and I'll prove you wrong. That's when Rowan had leaned forward, lowering his voice. It's in the Nightshade Library. Her ears had perked up at that. You know it? He asked, watching her expression carefully. Wednesday had only given the faintest smirk. Of course I do. Wednesday Addams wasn't the only one who left her mark on Jericho. Seems like Goody's been hiding behind me all this time. Wednesday entered the center of the library, where the afternoon sun cast a warm haze over the scene. The space was cluttered, still in the process of being arranged for the upcoming exhibition. A long table stretched through the middle of the room, scattered with framed sketches and architectural plans, some wrapped in parchment and styrofoam, others already unboxed and lined up with curatorial precision. Thing balanced on her shoulder, twitching with interest. She moved quietly through the display, eyes scanning her own work, the artifacts of another life. Her old architectural drawings, sketches from 1620s Jericho, and bits of her writing. All laid out, dissected, and reassembled for public consumption. Her scowl deepened when she spotted the floor plan of Nevermore Academy. It was pressed under clean glass like a specimen. They framed it, she muttered under her breath, voice tight with irritation. Thing leapt down onto the table and tapped near a familiar section of the blueprint, where they had previously discovered a hidden compartment. If I remembered where the rest were, I wouldn't be looking at this again, would I? She said flatly. Still, she leaned in. Her fingers hovered over the paper, tracing lines and corners, looking for anomalies. But her gaze kept drifting to something else. A presence, commanding and quiet, standing tall near the edge of the exhibit space. The portrait. It was set apart, prominently displayed on an easel with a velvet drape behind it. Unlike the other items, it had clearly already been chosen as the centerpiece. A charcoal portrait preserved beneath a thin glass pane. Two girls stood side by side in colonial dress, one in deep black, the other in soft, pale gray. Their braids were identical, their expressions unreadable and calm, with that same quiet intensity that drew viewers in and unsettled them all at once. The girl in black stood slightly apart, her hand resting at her side, while a disembodied one, a hand, independent and half-curled mid-motion, hovered gently over her shoulder. The other girl clutched a worn spellbook to her chest, its leather cover cracked and frayed at the edges. Wednesday stared, unmoving. Goody and Friday. Together. Preserved in silence. Her eyes narrowed. If I were a secret society, she whispered, turning back to the blueprint with renewed focus. Where would I hide? She retraced the layout of Nevermore, eyes scanning quickly now. Her finger stopped at a narrow gap near the pentagon-shaped garden, an odd, empty space just before the entrance. She remembered something. During the school's first groundbreaking ceremony, there had been a depression in the earth right around there. It was supposed to be filled in. But what if it wasn't? What if it was intentional? She stepped back, eyes darting from the floor plan to the portrait. Wednesday snapped out of her thoughts when she heard footsteps echoing across the polished floor. Things scrambled up her arm and vanished swiftly into her backpack, just as the library door creaked open. She instinctively shifted, planting herself calmly in front of the portrait, as if she'd simply been admiring it. Miss Thornhill stepped inside, her boots tapping lightly as she looked around. Wednesday? What are you doing here? She asked, her tone casual but observant. Processing, Wednesday replied smoothly, eyes still on the portrait. I didn't have a chance to look at these papers closely before we left for the competition. Miss Thornhill walked over, folding her arms as she joined her in front of the charcoal portrait. You must be curious about what your great-great-grandmother was like. Aunt, Wednesday corrected. Miss Thornhill blinked. What? She died at 16, Wednesday said plainly. So there's no way she could have had children. She must be my grandaunt. There was a short pause before Miss Thornhill smiled. Well, it seems to me like you take after her. I mean, both of them. She gestured lightly to the portrait. You three look alike. Wednesday nodded once, still watching the image of Friday with her unreadable expression. Genetics is one strange magic. Miss Thornhill gave a soft chuckle, though there was a glint of something else in her eyes. Then Principal Weems walked in. Wednesday didn't flinch. Her gaze flicked over to the tall woman who looked more annoyed than surprised. What are you doing here, Miss Addams? Weems asked coolly. The library is off limits to students for the time being. Wednesday raised an eyebrow, unbothered. You should know by now that whenever you designate something as off limits, you're only inviting me to go there. Weems sighed sharply. Out, Miss Addams. You've caused me enough trouble this week. Wednesday blinked, genuinely confused. What did I do? I just arrived yesterday. You do well to stay out of trouble, Weems warned, her tone clipped. That's when Wednesday caught on. I had nothing to do with what happened between Xavier and Rowan. In case you forgot, Rowan also pushed me down the slope. While I was snowboarding. Downhill. She began walking toward the door, but paused beside the long table. And you still haven't thanked me for finding these documents, she added, gesturing toward the parchment and frames. I expect full compensation. In the form of get-out-of-jail-free cards. One per priceless artifact retrieved. Weems narrowed her eyes. You expect me to turn a blind eye to your shenanigans? Not all of them, Wednesday said with a faint smirk. Just however many these are. She tapped the table once for emphasis. Principal Weems closed her eyes, taking in a sharp breath through her nose. And what makes you think I'd agree to that? If you don't, Wednesday's smile widened into something dangerous. I'll tell my family I was the one who found them. Do you think my great-aunts and uncles will let you keep these if they find out I recovered them? They could make the case that all of this belongs to us. Adams' property. She left those words hanging in the air like a knife on a thread. Then, with her usual unnerving calm, Wednesday turned and walked out the door, leaving Principal Weems silently seething in her wake. After the door shut, Miss Thornhill tried to downplay Wednesday's threat. She's bluffing, she said casually, brushing invisible dust off her skirt. It's just Wednesday being Wednesday. But Principal Weems didn't respond. Something stirred uncomfortably in her chest. Her heart pounded not because she feared Wednesday's words, but because she knew exactly what the Addams family was capable of when they were provoked. Without another word, she turned on her heel and left Thornhill alone in the library. Minutes later, in her office, Principal Weems called for an emergency school board meeting and also summoned the mayor. Within the hour, the board had assembled in the meeting room, murmuring and chuckling to themselves. We're here because an Addams made a legal threat, one member scoffed. Is this what we've come to? Principal Weems crossed her arms. She found the original architectural floor plans, spellbooks, and personal writings of Friday Addams. Do you understand the significance of that? She probably wants more keys to the school, another member muttered. Let her have them. It's just paper and ink. The mayor didn't laugh. I'm not so sure, he said, looking grim. You weren't there when her grandmother, Indora Addams, handed me a blank check to forget about the talent show bombing incident. One signature, and she wiped it from the record. He turned to the lawyer sitting quietly at the end of the table. Well, he asked, can the Addams family lay claim to these historical documents or not? The room fell silent. The lawyer straightened her blazer and opened a thin leather folder. It's not a simple answer, she said. But I'll break it down. She raised 3 fingers. Nevermore, Jericho, and the Addams family all have potential claims, but each one comes with limits. First, Nevermore. The artifacts were discovered on school property, so the school can make a custodial claim, but that's very different from legal ownership. Custodianship simply means you're in physical possession and have a duty to safeguard them. However, there's a complication, she added, tapping her folder. Wednesday Addams was not a student of Nevermore. She was its original founder and a teacher. Her twin sister, Goody Addams, was secondary to that role. There are no records, certificates, or official documentation that Wednesday transferred her ownership, leadership, or personal manuscripts to Goody or to Nevermore itself. And just as importantly, there are no records of Goody Addams handing these documents over to the school either. The board members stirred uneasily. What about Goody then? One asked. Goody was involved, the lawyer nodded, but without clear legal transfer or donation documents, neither she nor the school can claim ownership of Wednesday's personal writings and artifacts. What does that mean for us? Weems asked. It means your position is weak. As the founder and original author of these materials, Wednesday Addams, and by extension her family, has a stronger ancestral claim. Nevermore may have physical possession, but without proof of ownership or intent to donate, any claim the school asserts is legally vulnerable. Principal Weems exhaled sharply. So we can't even prove these were meant to stay here permanently? Correct, the lawyer said. This could be considered unintentional possession or, legally speaking, wrongful retention of property belonging to the Addams family. Second, Jericho. The town can argue cultural and historical significance if the documents include references to Jericho's founding, architecture, or town dealings. But because the materials were not found on public land and weren't part of any official town archive, that argument is very weak. She flipped a page and added, there are also no records of Goody or Wednesday Addams donating any of these works to the town. No ledgers, no letters, no signed transfers. Which makes the town's legal footing just as shaky. The mayor frowned. So the town gets shut out too. Most likely, unless they can prove municipal relevance, and even then, they're second in line to the Addams family. Third, the Addams family. If these works are exclusively those of Wednesday Addams, the family can make a direct claim. Courts generally honor lineage in matters of personal writings and intellectual property, especially when the individual in question was never a formal student, staff member, or donor to the institution holding the artifacts. She closed the folder with a quiet snap. And since Wednesday Addams wasn't a student, and there are no legal documents granting ownership of her work to the school or the town, the Addams family has the strongest claim. In fact, they could legally demand the immediate return of the materials. The boardroom fell into stunned silence. Principal Weems slowly turned to the group. I want everything cataloged, she said firmly. Condition reports. Inventory logs. Scan the entire collection and put it in our internal archives. If the Addams family makes a formal claim, we need to prove we acted in good faith as custodians. Otherwise, we'll lose everything. There was a pause before one board member leaned back in his chair and shrugged. She's just one student. How much trouble can she really cause on her own? Another chimed in, the exhibition hasn't even opened yet. We're still weeks away. Let's not escalate anything until we know where the Addamses stand. Exactly, a third added. We play nice. Let her poke around. Smile if her family shows up. If they take an interest in Wednesday's work, we'll reassess. Until then, we stay quiet and keep prepping the showcase. The mayor didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue either. He just exhaled slowly and muttered, let's just hope she stays bored. But Principal Weems wasn't so sure. Wednesday Addams never stayed bored for long. Chapter 21. Meanwhile, Wednesday went straight from the library to the hallway leading toward the Pentagon. She carefully counted her steps as she passed through the door. Sure enough, right beside the archway stood the statue of Edgar Allan Poe. Wednesday stared at it, baffled. How had Poe ended up here again? She had changed the statue in the past, designed it to be a hooded figure holding an open book. She remembered the risks of altering something so far ahead of its time. And yet, despite her intervention, Poe still stood in the same spot. She studied the statue meticulously. There, etched onto the cover of the open book in Poe's hands, was the unmistakable nightshade symbol. That hadn't been part of her original design. Someone else had added it, perhaps Goody, sometime after Wednesday's death in the past. She stepped up onto the base of the statue to see what was written on the pages of the book. The words made her smirk. She jumped back down, determined to return later that night when no one would be around to see her. When the rest of the students were confined to their dorms for curfew, Wednesday slipped through the darkened halls and returned to the statue. Without hesitation, she snapped her fingers twice. The floor beneath the statue rumbled faintly, then shifted to reveal a hidden spiral staircase spiraling downward. She descended carefully into the underground chamber. Books lined the walls. Portraits of Addams' ancestors, both living and long deceased, watched silently from the shadows. The air felt ancient, familiar. As she examined the shelves, her eyes landed on a book that seemed recently disturbed. Dust was smudged where fingers had brushed it aside. It had a deep purple cover. Wednesday pulled it down, opened it, and froze. Inside was a drawing of her, engaged in battle with a figure she could never forget, not even in 400 years. Joseph Crackstone. A flood of questions surged through her mind. Crackstone died centuries ago. So why would she be fighting him again? Why here? And in a finished Nevermore? She looked around the chamber, unease creeping in. She had intended for this secret room to exist, had carved it into the school's architecture while trapped in the past. But she had never planned for it to be repurposed by Goody. She had never placed the nightshade symbol on the statue. Someone else had made that decision. After she was gone. Now the room, like her legacy, was no longer entirely hers. And the final, most haunting question struck her. What happened after she and Tyler left? While Wednesday's mind was elsewhere, lost in secret staircases and purple books, Tyler had his own puzzle to solve. The body in the woods wasn't sitting right with him. His father was being tight-lipped, brushing it off like just another hiker who got lost and mauled by wildlife. But Tyler had seen the look in his eyes, tense, distant, guarded. It was the same look he had every time someone brought up the past. So when the sheriff wasn't home, Tyler went looking. He didn't expect much. Most sensitive files were locked away at the station. But something told him to check the old filing cabinet in the garage, the one his father never used anymore but also never threw out. It was buried under old tarps and broken tools, dusty and rusted at the edges. He popped the latch. The drawers creaked. Behind a stack of water-damaged arrest reports and yellowed invoices, he found it. A thin manila folder with a faded name typed across the tab. Addams, Gomez. Tyler froze. He knew the name. Everyone did. But he'd never seen the official file for himself, not even during the chaos of last year, when Wednesday had practically turned the school upside down. He carried the folder into the house, shut the door to his room, and sat at his desk. Inside were the original witness statements, a murder weapon photo, and a report from 30 years ago. All of it from when Gomez was a student at Nevermore. Tyler remembered bits from what his dad had said, how Gomez had been accused of killing a man named Garrett Gates at the Raven Ball, how the charges were mysteriously dropped, how nothing ever sat right about the case. But what stuck with him now is this. The sheriff had kept the file. Not at the station. At home. Hidden. Tyler narrowed his eyes as he flipped through the pages, piecing together the old story. But it was hard to ignore the growing question in the back of his mind. Why had his father kept this buried all these years? What would Wednesday ever found? What would she do with it? When Tyler woke up the next morning, the house was quiet. His father still hadn't come home. The couch was empty. No boots by the door. Coffee pot untouched. Tyler didn't even bother texting. He already knew where the sheriff was. Back at the station. Again. He grabbed his keys, headed out, and drove toward the police station, deliberately leaving early and taking the long way around town. Instead of going straight to Jericho High, He parked a few blocks away and waited across the street from the station, hiding behind a delivery van. Eventually, he saw his father step outside, coffee in hand, coat half-buttoned, muttering something into his radio as he got into the patrol car and drove off. As soon as the coast was clear, Tyler moved. It was still early. The station was mostly empty. No one stopped him. He slipped through the side door, down the hallway and into the sheriff's office. His heart was pounding, but he moved quickly. On his father's desk was a manila folder labeled with the latest case, the recent body found in the woods. Tyler flipped it open, scanning crime scene photos, an accident report, and a coroner's autopsy. Whatever happened to that man, it wasn't just an animal attack. Tyler pulled out his phone and started snapping photos. Every page. Every angle. He didn't have time to read through it all, but he'd go over the images later. Every second counted. Then, just as quietly, he left. No one saw him. No one stopped him. He got back into his car and drove the rest of the way to Jericho High. Just as he parked, his phone buzzed. "Dad." Tyler hesitated, then answered. "Why were you at the station?" His father's voice was sharp, accusing. "You know I get alerts when you're near there." Tyler gritted his teeth. Of course. The tracking app his father made him install, because he didn't trust him anymore. "I just passed by to see if you were still there," Tyler said flatly. "Since you didn't come home last night." There was a pause, then a quiet grunt. "We'll talk later." Tyler hung up, jaw clenched. Half the freedom he used to have. Twice the surveillance. He looked down at his phone at the folder of photos he just took. If his father wouldn't tell him the truth, he'd find it himself. Wednesday rubbed her temples. The migraine was relentless, pounding like a war drum behind her eyes. What she needed was caffeine immediately. She made her way to the weather vane. The bell above the door jingled softly as she stepped inside. Tyler looked up the moment she entered, their eyes locking across the cafe. Neither of them said a word at first. She walked past him and slid into her usual booth by the window. A minute later, Tyler approached with a steaming quad in hand. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting the cup in front of her. Frustrated, she replied without missing a beat. "I have even more unanswered questions now." She pulled out the purple book she had taken from the Nightshade Library, flipping it open to a page she had already memorized. There, etched in old ink, was a drawing of her locked in battle with a figure she recognized instantly. Joseph Crackstone. Tyler's expression shifted. "That doesn't make sense," he said slowly. "Crackstone died 400 years ago, in the past. How would you be fighting him now?" "I've been asking myself the same question," Wednesday muttered, sipping her quad, her dark eyes narrowing on the image. A beat of silence passed before Tyler leaned closer. "Can you come over to my place tonight? There's something I want to show you." "Why not show me now?" she asked, her tone sharp but curious. He hesitated. "Because it's a police file. About your dad. From when he was at Nevermore. I found it. In my house. My dad can't know I saw it." That got her attention. Wednesday's eyes sharpened, glinting with intrigue. Whatever was in that file, she was going to find out. "Fine," she said, closing the book. "I'll come." In Ophelia Hall at Nevermore, Thing, the disembodied sentient hand, was about to dive into Wednesday's backpack when she caught him pale-handed. She shut the flap closed with a sharp snap. "No. Watch Sheriff Galpin. Make sure he doesn't come home while I'm at his house." Thing paused, fingers hesitating mid-sign. Then with unmistakable cheek signed, "So, you want some alone time with Tyler?" Wednesday's eyes flashed. "Do what I said. If his father catches me there, I'll cut off your fingers one by one and toss them in the fireplace." "Understood." Thing gave a huff, if a hand could huff, and slunk away toward the nearest window, sulking as he went. But Wednesday didn't go out the door and into the hallway like she usually did. Instead, she turned to her closet. Inside, Beneath a few carefully folded clothes, she knelt and pulled up a worn section of floorboard to reveal a hatch embedded in the floor. Dust had built up between the seal, and the heavy iron frame made it difficult to lift. She grunted, annoyed, but finally wedged it open. Wednesday couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. She'd prepared for this exact scenario over 400 years ago. Back in 1620s Jericho, long before Nevermore Academy had even been conceived, she had painstakingly designed a network of crawl spaces, secret rooms, and passageways into the land itself, hidden deep beneath the foundations that would one day house the school. All of it laid out with brutal foresight, in case she and Tyler ever returned to the present. She dropped down into the darkness and landed neatly on a spiral stone stairwell, worn smooth by time. The dimensions were narrow, just enough for someone 5 feet 1 inch to slip in and out with ease. Her exact height. Planned. Calculated. Thing tossed her the flashlight and her backpack before she pulled the hatch shut above her. This secret passage had been constructed for one purpose, a direct route from Nevermore to Jericho. She had debated, even back then, about connecting all her tunnels, but decided it would be too risky. If one was discovered, they all would be. So each was sealed off, isolated, and pointed like an arrow to a specific destination. Eventually, she reached a dead end. Her fingers pressed against the cold metal of a shuttered door, camouflaged by centuries of compacted dirt and tangled vegetation. Wednesday braced herself and pushed. It groaned under the weight of earth and time, but slowly gave way. As she crawled out, brushing grime from her shoulders, she paused and made a mental note. Plant thick shrubs above this entrance. If the dirt slides off again, I don't want it exposed. She dusted off her boots and headed toward town.